People lose interest when you stop over-explaining yourself. Most people believe that explaining more will make others understand them better. They think clarity comes from details, from justification, from saying everything the right way. But psychology reveals something uncomfortable. The more you explain yourself, the less interesting and less powerful you appear. Over-explaining is not clarity. It is permission. Permission for others to question you. Permission to doubt your decisions. Permission to negotiate your boundaries. When you explain too much, you silently say, "My choice needs your approval." And approval seeking is never attractive. This is why something strange happens when you stop over-explaining. People lean back. They become curious. Sometimes they even lose interest. And that loss of interest is power. Because interest driven by control is not real interest. It is access. Over-explaining keeps people engaged for the wrong reasons. They listen not to understand you, but to find openings, weak points, places to push. When you stop explaining, those openings disappear. And suddenly, people don't know how to interact with you the same way. They may say, "You've changed, you're distant, you don't communicate anymore." But what actually changed is not your communication. It is your self-respect. You stop narrating your decisions. You stop defending your boundaries. You stop trying to be understood by everyone. And this removes emotional access. This video is not about being silent. It is not about being cold. It is not about being mysterious on purpose. It is about understanding this truth. People lose interest when you stop over-explaining because they lose control, not connection. By the end of this video, you will understand why over-explaining lowers your perceived value, why silence after decisions feels unsettling to others, how explanation invites negotiation, why confident people rarely justify themselves, and how to stop explaining without becoming rude or distant. If you've ever felt exhausted trying to be understood, if you've noticed people questioning you the more you explain, then this video will change how you communicate forever. Stay with me, because once you understand why less explanation creates more respect, you will never give away your power again. Why over-explaining signals insecurity, even when it's not. Over-explaining often comes from a good place. You want to be clear. You want to avoid misunderstanding. You want to be fair, reasonable, and understood. But psychology doesn't judge intention. It reads signals, and over-explaining sends a signal most people don't realize they're sending. It signals uncertainty, not always about the decision, but about how it will be received. When you explain too much, you reveal that you are managing perception, not simply stating reality. And perception management lowers perceived authority. Another uncomfortable truth. People rarely over-explain when they feel internally settled. They over-explain when they feel a need to be accepted. This need doesn't mean weakness, it means external referencing. You are checking your worth against someone else's reaction, and people feel that immediately. Another key psychological mechanism is cognitive invitation. When you over-explain, you invite others into your reasoning process. That sounds collaborative, but it creates a problem. Once people are inside your reasoning, they feel entitled to challenge it. They ask, "Why this? Why now? Have you considered that?" Suddenly your decision becomes a discussion, and discussions erode authority when they weren't requested. Another subtle effect of over-explaining is lowered status positioning. High-status individuals state decisions. Low-status positioning justifies decisions. This doesn't mean arrogance, it means internal certainty. Certainty does not need defense. Another psychological consequence: over-explaining trains people to expect explanations. Once that expectation is set, silence feels suspicious to them. They think something is wrong when nothing is. You accidentally condition others to question you more. Another important realization: the more you explain, the more you reveal emotional investment. Emotional investment signals leverage. Leverage invites pressure. Pressure leads to exhaustion. This is why chronic over-explainers often feel drained after conversations. They are not tired from talking. They are tired from defending identity. Another uncomfortable truth: over-explaining confuses clarity with detail. Clarity is simple. Detail is defensive. You can be clear in one sentence, you over-explain in 5. And the longer the explanation, the weaker the message feels. Another psychological effect. People remember explanations less than they remember decisions. They forget your reasons. They remember your stance. Strong stances create respect. Long reasons create debate. Another realization, over-explaining often keeps you emotionally attached to outcomes. You want the other person to agree, approve, or understand. But agreement is not required for respect. Respect comes from consistency, not consensus. The most important realization of this part is this. Over-explaining doesn't make you clearer. It makes you more negotiable. And once you are negotiable, people naturally push. How over-explaining trains people to question you. Over-explaining does more than weaken authority. It trains behavior. When you explain every decision, people learn a pattern. Your choices are open for review. This training happens quietly. No one announces it, no one plans it, but the mind adapts. Another psychological truth. People question what feels negotiable, and over-explaining makes everything feel negotiable. And over-explaining makes everything feel negotiable. When you justify your decisions repeatedly, you teach others that your boundaries can be debated, your timing can be challenged, your priorities can be adjusted, not because they want control, but because your behavior offered it. Another key mechanism is expectation setting. The first time you over-explain, it feels harmless. The second time, it feels normal. By the third time, it becomes expected. Silence then feels suspicious. People think, why didn't they explain this time? Did something change? Are they hiding? Something? Nothing changed, except the habit you created. Another uncomfortable truth. Over-explaining invites correction. Once people feel entitled to your reasoning, they start improving it. They suggest alternatives. They point out flaws. They minimize your logic. This shifts the dynamic from respect to evaluation. Evaluation erodes authority. Another psychological effect is role reversal. Instead of you deciding and acting, you begin defending and responding. The other person becomes the judge. This role reversal feels subtle, but it drains confidence quickly. Another important realization. Over-explaining keeps conversations alive that should have ended. A clear decision closes a loop. An explanation reopens it. People keep asking questions not because they are confused, but because the door is still open. Another truth most people miss. The more you explain, the more emotionally invested others become in changing your mind. They are not just listening, they are participating. Participation creates attachment. Attachment fuels persistence. This is why people who over-explain often feel argued with. They invited the argument unintentionally. Another psychological pattern. Over-explaining shifts focus from outcome to reasoning. But people care more about outcomes than logic. When the outcome is firm, logic becomes secondary. When logic is emphasized, outcome feels weak. Another realization. People rarely question those who are comfortable with silence. Silence after a decision signals completion. Completion ends curiosity. Curiosity only exists when something feels unfinished. Over-explaining leaves everything unfinished. Another important point. Once people learn they can question you, they will test how far questioning goes. They push, they delay, they resist. Not because they dislike you, but because the system allows it. The most important realization of this part is this. Over-explaining doesn't just weaken your position once. It conditions others to keep questioning you. And once conditioning is set, clarity must be rebuilt through restraint. Why people lose interest when control is removed. Interest is not always curiosity. Often it is control disguised as attention. When people ask questions repeatedly, request explanations, or stay highly engaged with your decisions, it can feel like interest. But psychology reveals something deeper. Much of that interest exists because people feel involved in directing you. Over-explaining keeps that involvement alive. It gives others a role in your choices. It allows them to influence timing, direction, and outcome. And influence creates engagement. When you stop over-explaining, that influence disappears. And with it, a certain kind of interest disappears too. This is why people suddenly feel distant when you become concise. They are not confused. They are disengaged from control. Another uncomfortable truth. Some people were never interested in you. They were interested in access. Access to your reasoning, access to your emotions, access to your availability. When explanations end, access ends, and interest that depended on access collapses. Another key psychological mechanism is investment withdrawal. When people participate in your decisions, they feel invested. Investment keeps them engaged. When you stop explaining, they are no longer invested, so they stop leaning in. This feels like loss, but it is actually clarity. Another subtle effect. Over-explaining keeps conversations open-ended. Open-endedness sustains attention. Finality ends it. When your words become shorter, more decisive, and less emotional, the interaction resolves faster. Resolution ends interest that depended on unresolved tension. Another important realization. People who are genuinely interested don't need explanations to stay engaged. They respect boundaries, they accept decisions, they adjust behavior. People who lose interest when explanations stop were attached to influence, not connection. Another psychological truth. Control-seeking interest is often mistaken for closeness. But closeness doesn't require constant justification. It requires mutual respect. Another key point. When you stop over-explaining, you become less predictable emotionally. Predictability fuels manipulation. Unpredictability reduces it. Some people disengage because they can no longer read you easily, and that discomfort gets labeled as loss of interest. Another realization, this loss of interest is not failure, it is filtration. You are removing interactions that were sustained by imbalance. What remains may be quieter, but it is healthier. Another subtle shift, you stop performing for attention, and performance is what kept some people watching. Without performance, only genuine connection stays. Another truth most people miss. When control is removed, people must decide whether they respect you. Some choose to, some leave. Both outcomes restore your energy. The most important realization of this part is this. People lose interest when you stop over-explaining. Not because you became less valuable, but because you became less controllable. And losing control over you is what ends false engagement. How silence restores authority and self-respect. Silence is often misunderstood. People think silence means uncertainty, avoidance, or lack of confidence. But psychology shows the opposite. Silence, when chosen consciously, restores authority faster than explanation ever can. When you stop over-explaining, you stop leaking authority. Authority leaks when you justify decisions you already made. You soften boundaries with reasons. You respond emotionally to every question. Silence closes those leaks. Another important psychological shift. Silence recenters control. When you speak less, others speak more. They reveal intentions. They expose expectations. They show whether they respect your limits. Over-explaining hides this information. Silence reveals it. Another uncomfortable truth. Authority is not built by convincing people. It is built by consistency. Silence supports consistency. When your actions stay the same without constant verbal reinforcement, people learn that your decisions are stable. Stability creates trust. Trust creates respect. Another key mechanism. Silence removes the need to perform competence. Over-explaining often comes from wanting to appear reasonable, thoughtful, or fair. But true authority does not need to appear competent. It is competent. Competence expressed through action does not require narration. Another psychological effect. Silence raises perceived value. What is constantly explained feels common. What is stated once and then embodied feels valuable. Scarcity applies to words too. Another realization. Silence after decision signals emotional regulation. Regulation communicates strength. People may not like it, but they adjust to it. Another important truth. Self-respect grows when you stop justifying yourself. Every unnecessary explanation teaches you to doubt your own decisions. Silence teaches you to stand by them. Standing by decisions strengthens internal alignment. Internal alignment strengthens presence. Presence is what people respond to first. Another subtle but powerful shift. Silence removes hooks for manipulation. Manipulation needs material, reasons to twist, words to reframe, emotion to exploit. Silence provides none. Another key point: when you stop over-explaining, conversations shorten. Shorter conversations reduce emotional drain. Reduced drain improves tone. Improved tone reinforces authority. It becomes a self-correcting loop. Another realization: people may accuse you of being distant when you become quieter. But distance is not disconnection. It is boundary clarity. Boundary clarity is respectful, even when misunderstood. The most important realization of this part is this: silence does not weaken your position. It clarifies it. And clarity always restores authority. Internally first, externally next. When explaining is necessary, vests when it weakens you. Not all explanations are bad. The problem is not explaining. The problem is explaining from the wrong place. Psychology makes a clear distinction between explanation as clarity and explanation as defense. Explanation is necessary when it provides information. It weakens you when it seeks approval. This difference changes everything. Another important realization: healthy explanation happens before decisions are finalized or when collaboration is required. Weak explanation happens after decisions, to justify them emotionally. Timing reveals motive. If you explain before acting, you are inviting input. If you explain after acting, you may be seeking acceptance. Another key psychological marker is emotional tone. Necessary explanations are calm, brief, and factual. Weak explanations are long, emotional, and repetitive. Length often signals insecurity. Confidence is concise. Another important distinction: explanation is healthy when it answers genuine confusion. It weakens you when it responds to resistance. Confusion seeks clarity. Resistance seeks control. Responding to resistance with explanation rewards resistance. Another psychological trap: explaining to people who have already shown disrespect. Disrespect is not cured by reasoning. It is addressed by boundaries. Explanation to disrespect teaches people they can cross lines and still receive engagement. Another key point: explaining once is communication. Explaining repeatedly is negotiation. Negotiation lowers authority when authority was not being questioned legitimately. Another important realization: you do not owe explanations for personal boundaries. Boundaries are not debates, they are declarations. Explaining boundaries turns them into requests. Requests invite refusal. Another psychological signal to watch: if you feel drained after explaining, you explain too much. Healthy explanations do not exhaust. They clarify and end. Exhaustion signals self-betrayal. Another subtle but powerful truth: the people who respect you rarely require explanations. The people who demand explanations often resist your autonomy. Knowing this distinction saves enormous energy. Another key principle: explain process, not self. You can explain what will happen without explaining why you deserve to choose it. Process informs, self-justification weakens. Another realization: silence after explanation is as important as explanation itself. Explaining and then staying silent prevents negotiation loops. Another important truth: the goal is not to never explain. The goal is to never over-explain. Over-explaining happens when you speak to be accepted, not to be understood. The most important realization of this part is this: explanation builds respect. When it comes from certainty, it weakens respect. When it comes from doubt, knowing the difference is emotional intelligence. How to stop over-explaining without becoming cold. Stopping over-explaining does not mean becoming distant. It means becoming intentional. Most people fear that if they speak less, they will seem rude, unapproachable, or emotionally unavailable. But psychology shows something important. Warmth comes from presence, not from explanations. You can be calm, respectful, and kind without narrating every decision. The key is tone and timing. Another important shift: replace reasons with statements. Instead of explaining why, state what is. Not defensively, not abruptly, simply factually. Statements feel grounded, reasons feel negotiable. Another psychological principle: respond to questions, not to pressure. A genuine question seeks information, pressure seeks influence. Answer questions briefly, ignore pressure calmly. This distinction prevents emotional escalation. Another crucial skill is pause control. Over-explaining often happens because silence feels uncomfortable. So you fill it. But silence is not emptiness, it is space. Space gives your words weight. When you pause, others adjust. They listen more closely. They choose words more carefully. Another practical shift. Explain once, then stop. One explanation is clarity. 2 is reinforcement. 3 is negotiation. Stopping after one explanation signals completion. Completion reduces resistance. Another psychological insight. You don't need to soften boundaries with emotion. Emotion invites discussion. Clarity ends it. You can say no without apology, without justification, without tension. Calm delivery keeps warmth intact. Another important realization. Warmth is in how you speak, not in how much you say. Short sentences, steady tone, open posture, these maintain connection. Lengthy explanations often sound anxious, not warm. Another key shift. Let behavior answer questions. When you stop explaining, your actions begin to speak. Consistency teaches faster than words. People adapt to behavior more than to reasoning. Another subtle but powerful change. Stop preemptive explaining. Preemptive explanations assume disagreement before it exists. This weakens confidence. Wait, if clarification is needed, it will be asked for. Another important truth. You don't need to manage how others feel about your decisions. Managing emotions is exhausting. Maintaining clarity is sustainable. Another realization. People respect boundaries delivered calmly more than boundaries delivered emotionally. Emotion feels reactive. Calm feels deliberate. Another key point. If someone truly cares, they will ask respectfully. If they don't, their interest was conditional anyway. The most important realization of this part is this. You don't lose warmth by speaking less. You lose drain. And removing drain restores energy, clarity, and respect. Why confident people let misunderstandings exist. One of the hardest habits to break is correcting every misunderstanding. Most people over-explain because they fear being misjudged. They want to be seen as reasonable, fair, good, right? But confident people understand something deeper. Being misunderstood is not dangerous. When your self-respect is intact, misunderstandings only feel threatening when your identity depends on others' approval. When you trust yourself, you don't rush to fix every narrative. Another important psychological truth. Trying to control how others see you keeps you dependent on their perception. Confident people release that control. They let people think what they want because they are no longer managing impressions. Another subtle shift. When you stop correcting misunderstandings, people are forced to observe behavior. Behavior reveals truth faster than explanations. Explanations can be twisted, behavior cannot. Another key realization. Overcorrecting perceptions keeps you emotionally tied to others' opinions. Letting misunderstandings exist creates emotional independence. Independence restores power. Another uncomfortable truth. Some misunderstandings are useful. They reveal who respects you enough to ask calmly and who judges quickly. This distinction saves energy. Another psychological effect. When you don't rush to clarify, your silence creates contrast. People notice you didn't defend yourself. You didn't react. You didn't explain. That contrast elevates your presence. Another important realization. Confident people understand that clarity is proven over time, not in conversations. Time corrects misunderstandings better than words ever can. Another subtle but powerful shift. Letting misunderstandings exist filters your social environment. Those who need constant explanation fall away. Those who respect autonomy stay. Another truth most people miss. You don't owe everyone your inner reasoning. Privacy is not secrecy, it is self-respect. Another key point. Misunderstandings only hurt when you keep returning to explain them. When you stop returning, they lose relevance. Another realization. Confidence is not being perfectly understood. Confidence is being okay even when you're not. The most important realization of this part is this. The moment you stop trying to be understood by everyone, you become respected by the right people. Why less explanation creates more respect and peace. At some point, you realize something quietly powerful. You don't need to be understood by everyone to be respected by the right people. Over-explaining keeps you busy managing reactions, not building peace. And peace is what confident people protect most. When you stop over-explaining, you reclaim something essential: control over your energy. You no longer spend mental effort trying to sound reasonable, trying to preempt criticism, trying to soften decisions. You simply decide and move. That movement changes everything. Another truth becomes clear: people who respect you adjust without explanation. People who don't require endless clarification. This distinction is not painful anymore. It is informative. You stop chasing alignment, you allow it to reveal itself. Another powerful shift. Silence becomes your filter. Not silence out of fear, silence out of clarity. You speak when it matters. You explain when it serves a purpose. You stay quiet when explanation would weaken you. This balance creates calm authority. Calm authority does not demand attention, it attracts it. Another realization: you don't lose people when you stop over-explaining. You lose dependence-based connections. What remains is quieter but cleaner. Less noise, less tension, less self-betrayal. Another important truth: respect does not come from being convincing. It comes from being consistent. Consistency makes explanations unnecessary. People learn how you operate by watching what you tolerate, not by listening to why. Another final shift happens internally. You stop doubting yourself after conversations. You stop replaying what you said. You stop wishing you explained more, because you acted from alignment. Alignment creates peace. Peace creates strength. And strength does not need justification. This is the final lesson. When you stop over-explaining, you stop inviting people into your decisions and start inviting them into your standards. Some will lose interest. That's not loss. That's clarity. And clarity is always worth it.